God. This is brilliant.
My daughter laughed the moment she heard the clacking of my old typewriter. "Mom, nobody writes like that anymore," Emily said, shaking her head like I was some kind of relic. Then she picked up one of my pages, skimmed a line, and laughed even harder. What she didn't know was that every word I was typing wasn't just a story, it was a truth I had buried for decades. A truth about her father, about our family, about everything she thought she knew. And in less than a week, a stranger would read those same pages and offer me something my own daughter never did believe. If this story touches, you don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And have you ever been underestimated by your own family? After Emily left that afternoon, the house felt quieter than usual, but not peaceful. There's a difference between silence and emptiness, and that day, it was the kind that pressed against your chest and made breathing feel heavier than it should. I sat there for a long time, my fingers resting on the worn keys of the typewriter, staring at the page she had laughed at. The words blurred together, not because they were wrong, but because I suddenly felt foolish for believing they ever mattered. The late afternoon sun stretched across the living room floor, catching the edges of old furniture that had been in the same place for over 30 years. Nothing had really changed in this house, except the people. Or maybe it was just me who hadn't changed enough. I slowly pulled the page out of the typewriter. The paper made that soft, familiar sound as it slid free, a sound I had come to associate with quiet determination. But today, it sounded more like defeat. Emily used to love that sound when she was little. I closed my eyes, and just like that, I was back in a different version of this same room, smaller, brighter, filled with laughter. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a coloring book while I typed away. Every now and then, she'd look up and ask, "Mom, what are you writing?" And I would smile and say, "Stories, sweetheart. One day, maybe someone will read them." She would nod, like that made perfect sense. Back then, I believed it too. I set the paper down and leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. It had been 5 years since Richard passed away, and yet sometimes it still felt like he had just stepped out of the room and would be back any minute with that gentle smile of his. He was the one who bought me this typewriter. It wasn't new even then. He had found it in a small antique shop downtown, tucked away in the corner, like something forgotten. I remember laughing when he brought it home, asking him why on earth he would spend money on something so outdated. But he had just shrugged and said, "Because it fits you better than anything new ever could." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. Now I think I do. Richard believed in me in a way no one else ever had. Not even my own parents. To them, writing was always just a hobby, something you did in your spare time, not something you built a life around. And life? Well, life had a way of filling up every spare moment. There were bills to pay, meals to cook, a child to raise. Dreams became something you folded neatly and tucked away, telling yourself you'd come back to them someday. But someday has a way of slipping through your fingers. I stood up slowly and walked toward the small bookshelf near the window. My fingers brushed over the spines of old photo albums, dusty novels, and finally landed on a small wooden box. For a moment, I hesitated. I hadn't opened it in years. When I lifted the lid, the faint scent of old paper drifted up, carrying memories with it. Inside was the manuscript I had written decades ago, typed on this very machine, page by page, late at night when everyone else was asleep. I picked it up carefully, as if it might fall apart in my hands. Back then, I had thought it was the beginning of something. Instead, it became the end. I remembered the day I finished it so clearly. I had sat at this same table, staring at the final page, my heart racing with a mixture of pride and fear. Richard had come home from work exhausted, but smiling, and I had handed it to him without saying a word. He read the first few pages right there, standing in the doorway. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "You have to send this out," he told me. "Clara, this is real. This is something people need to read." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But then the bills came in. The car broke down. Emily needed new school supplies, new clothes, 1,000 things that couldn't wait, and suddenly the idea of sending out a manuscript felt selfish. So I told myself I would do it later. I never did. I ran my hand over the top page, tracing the letters of my own name printed neatly at the top. Clara Fleming. It looked like someone else's name. Someone braver. Someone who hadn't spent her whole life putting everything and everyone else first. A sudden knock at the door startled me. I quickly closed the box and set it back on the shelf, my heart still pounding as I made my way to the front door. When I opened it, I found Noah Bennett standing there, holding a small package in one hand and offering a polite smile. "Hi, Mrs. Fleming," he said. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Noah had moved in next door about a year ago. He was a quiet man, always respectful, the kind of neighbor who waved when he saw you, but never intruded. "Not at all," I replied, forcing a small smile. "Come in." He stepped inside, glancing around as if he were taking in the room for the first time, even though he'd been here before. "I think this was delivered to my place by mistake," he said, handing me the package. I thanked him and set it down on the table, but before I could say anything else, his attention shifted to the typewriter. I felt a flicker of embarrassment. "Oh, that old thing," I said lightly. "I suppose it's hard to ignore?" "It's beautiful," he said, stepping closer. "You don't see many of these anymore." I let out a small laugh. That's exactly what my daughter said, although she didn't sound quite as impressed. Noah hesitated for a moment, then looked at me more carefully. "I heard some of that earlier," he admitted gently. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to eavesdrop." I shook my head. "It's all right." She wasn't exactly whispering. There was a brief silence, and then his eyes moved to the stack of typed pages beside the machine. "Do you mind if I ask what you're working on?" I followed his gaze, feeling that familiar mix of pride and vulnerability tighten in my chest. "It's just something I've been writing," I said. "Nothing important." Noah didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached out slowly as if giving me time to stop him, and picked up the top page. He read a few lines, then a few more. The room seemed to hold its breath, and for the first time in a very long time, someone wasn't laughing. Noah didn't speak right away. He just stood there, holding that single page like it was something fragile, something that needed to be handled with care. His eyes moved slowly across the lines, his expression changing in a way I couldn't quite read at first. I felt my hands tighten at my sides. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, stepping forward. "I didn't mean for you to read that. It's not finished." "It's really not, Mrs. Fleming," he interrupted softly. There was something in his voice that made me stop. He looked up at me then, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Respect. "This is really good." I let out a small, awkward laugh, the kind people make when they don't quite believe what they're hearing. "Oh, I think you're being kind," I said. "It's just something I do to pass the time." "No," he said, shaking his head gently. "That's not what this is." He glanced back down at the page, reading another line under his breath, as if confirming something for himself. "There's honesty here," he continued. "The kind people don't usually write down. And the way you describe things, it doesn't feel like fiction. It feels lived. I swallowed, unsure of what to say. For so long, I had trained myself not to expect anything from my writing. Not praise, not attention, not even acknowledgement. It was safer that way. If no one saw it, no one could dismiss it, or worse, laugh at it, like Emily had. It's just my life, I said quietly. Nothing special. Noah looked at me again, this time with a slight furrow in his brow. You'd be surprised how rare that is, he said. Most people don't even understand their own lives well enough to write them this clearly. I turned away, suddenly uncomfortable under his gaze. Compliments had a way of making me feel exposed, like someone had opened a door I'd spent years carefully keeping shut. You don't have to say things like that, I murmured. I know it's not important. There was a pause behind me. Then I heard him set the paper down carefully on the table. Can I ask you something? He said. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the question. Why haven't you shared this with anyone before? The simplicity of it caught me off guard. I hesitated, my fingers brushing absent-mindedly against the edge of the table. Life, I said finally. It gets in the way. Noah didn't look convinced. That's part of it, I admitted. But the truth is, I never thought it would matter to anyone else. And after a while, you stop trying. I could feel the weight of those words settling between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Noah took a step closer. Have you ever tried to publish anything? The question hit me harder than I expected. I shook my head immediately. No, I wouldn't even know where to begin. That's not what I asked, he said gently. I looked up at him confused. Have you ever tried? He repeated. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Because the truth was, I had. Once. A long time ago. I thought about it, I said slowly. Years ago. I even had something finished. Noah's eyes lit up slightly. What happened to it? I let out a quiet breath, my gaze drifting toward the bookshelf again. It's still here, I said. Somewhere. Could I see it? The question made my chest tighten. That manuscript wasn't just paper and ink. It was a version of me I had left behind. A version that still believed things were possible. Showing it to someone felt like opening a time capsule or reopening a wound. I don't know, I said, hesitating. Noah didn't push. He just nodded as if he understood. That's okay, he said. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. His kindness only made it harder to refuse. I stood there for a moment, caught between instinct and something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Finally, I turned and walked toward the shelf. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the wooden box again. I could feel Noah watching me, but he didn't say a word. When I opened the lid this time, it felt different. Not like I was hiding something, but like I was about to reveal it. I lifted the manuscript out and held it for a moment, staring at the yellowed pages. I wrote this when Emily was still in elementary school, I said quietly. After she went to bed, mostly. It took me almost a year. Noah stepped closer, his expression focused. And you never showed it to anyone. I showed it to my husband, I said. He loved it. And that wasn't enough. I smiled faintly. It should have been. I handed him the manuscript. He took it carefully, like he understood what it meant to me. For the next few minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft turning of pages. I watched his face as he read, watched the way his eyes moved, the way his expression shifted. There was no mockery, no impatience, Only attention. Real attention. At one point, he paused and looked up at me. "Why didn't you send this out?" he asked. I hesitated, the old answers rising automatically. "We needed the money," I said. "There were more important things." "No," he said quietly. "I mean, why didn't you ever come back to it?" The question lingered in the air. I didn't have a good answer, because the truth wasn't practical. It wasn't about time or money or responsibilities. It was about fear. I think I began, then stopped. Noah waited. "I think I got used to the idea that it didn't matter," I said finally. That I didn't matter in that way. Saying it out loud made something inside me shift, something I hadn't realized was still there. Noah closed the manuscript slowly. "I don't believe that," he said. I let out a small, tired laugh. "You don't have to." "But I do," he insisted. "Because this," he tapped the pages lightly, "this is the kind of writing people look for. The kind they remember." I shook my head. "You're overestimating it." "No," he said again, more firmly this time. "I'm not." He stepped back, as if giving both of us space to think. "Mrs. Fleming." "Clara," he corrected gently. "What if I told you I know someone in publishing?" I blinked, caught off guard. "You do?" He nodded. "A friend of mine works as an editor in New York. We've kept in touch over the years. I could show her a sample of your work." My heart skipped. The idea felt too big, too sudden, too late, I don't think that's the good idea," I said quickly. "It's not ready. And besides, people like her, they're looking for something else, something more current." "You don't know that," he said. "I do," I insisted. "I've seen how the world works." Noah studied me for a moment, then sighed softly. "Or maybe you've just convinced yourself that it's safer not to try." His words landed harder than I expected, because deep down I knew he was right. I looked at the typewriter, then at the manuscript still in his hands. For years, I had told myself I was content just writing for myself, but now standing there, I wasn't so sure anymore. "What would it involve?" I asked quietly. Noah's expression softened just slightly. "Just a few pages," he said. "No commitment, no pressure. Just letting someone else see what you've already created." I hesitated. And then for the first time in decades, I didn't say no. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Sleep had come in fragments the night before. Short, restless stretches interrupted by thoughts I hadn't allowed myself to entertain in years. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Noah's expression as he read my pages. Not polite, not dismissive, interested. That alone was enough to keep me awake. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long moment, staring at my hands. They looked older than I remembered. Thinner, more fragile, marked by time and quiet labor. These were the same hands that had typed every word of that manuscript, every sentence of the pages now stacked beside my typewriter. And yet, for decades, I had convinced myself they hadn't created anything of value. That belief felt unstable now. Downstairs, the house greeted me with the same stillness as always. I made myself a cup of coffee, moving slowly through the routine as if grounding myself in something familiar. The kettle hissed. The mug warmed my fingers. The first sip carried a bitterness that felt almost comforting. But nothing quite settled the unease inside me, because today everything felt like it was on the verge of changing. Or maybe it already had. I found myself standing in front of the typewriter again before I even realized I had walked into the living room. The pages from yesterday were still there, neatly stacked, as if waiting. Waiting for me? I reached out and touched the top sheet, my fingers lingering there. Just a few pages, I murmured to myself. That's what Noah had said. No commitment, no pressure, just letting someone else see. It sounded simple, but nothing about it felt simple. Before I could change my mind, I pulled out a chair and sat down. The keys felt familiar beneath my fingers, solid, steady, unchanged. Unlike everything else. I took a breath. And then I started typing. The words came slowly at first, like they were testing the ground beneath them. But then something shifted, and they began to flow, pulling memories with them, pulling feelings I had long buried. I wrote about Richard. Not just the good parts, but the hard ones too. The nights he came home exhausted, carrying worries he never fully shared. The quiet arguments we had over bills and choices and things we both wished we could fix. The way he still found a way to smile at me, even when everything felt uncertain. And I wrote about Emily. Not the woman she was now, but the child she used to be. The little girl who believed in stories, who sat at my feet and listened like every word mattered, who once told me she wanted to grow up and make people feel things. The little girl who believed in stories, who sat at my feet and listened like every word mattered, who once told me she wanted to grow up and make people feel things the way books did. I paused there, my fingers hovering over the keys. When had that version of her disappeared? Or maybe when had I stopped seeing her? A sharp knock at the door broke my thoughts. I flinched slightly, my heart jumping in my chest. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But the knock came again, firmer this time. I stood up slowly and made my way to the door, my mind already racing through possibilities. When I opened it, Emily stood there. Her expression was tight, controlled, but there was something else underneath it, something unsettled. "Mom," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door behind her, my chest tightening. "I wasn't expecting you," I said, carefully. Clearly, she replied, glancing toward the living room. Her eyes landed on the typewriter immediately. Of course they did. "You're still doing this," she said, her voice flat. I felt a familiar sting, but this time, something inside me resisted the urge to shrink under it. "Yes," I said simply. She let out a short, humorless laugh. "I don't understand you," she said. "You really think this is going somewhere?" The words hung in the air between us. Yesterday, I would have stayed quiet. I would have looked down, changed the subject, let the moment pass. But something had changed. "No," I said. Emily blinked, caught off guard. "No," she repeated. "I don't know where it's going," I clarified. "And for the first time, I think that's okay." She stared at me, as if trying to figure out who I was. "Mom, this isn't a hobby anymore," she said, her tone sharpening. "You're letting that neighbor fill your head with ideas. You don't even know him." "I know enough," I said. "Do you?" she shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like he's taking advantage of you." The accusation hit harder than I expected. "Noah isn't taking advantage of me," I said firmly. "He read my work. That's all. And suddenly he thinks you're some kind of writer," she said, her voice rising. "Mom, people like him say things like that all the time." "It doesn't mean anything. It meant something to me," I replied. The room went quiet. Emily's expression shifted slightly, not softer, but uncertain. "You're being unrealistic," she said after a moment. "You've spent your whole life doing something else. You can't just change everything now." I held her gaze. "Why not?" The question seemed to catch her off guard again. "Because that's not how the world works," she said. You need stability. You need to be practical. Like you? I asked gently. She hesitated. Yes, she said. Exactly like me. I studied her for a moment. Her posture was tense, her shoulders tight, her eyes sharper than they needed to be. There was something beneath her confidence, something strained. You look tired, I said. She frowned. I'm fine. Emily, I said I'm fine, she snapped. The sudden edge in her voice filled the room. We stood there in silence for a moment, the distance between us feeling wider than ever. Then she sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't want to see you get hurt, she said, her voice quieter now. Something in my chest shifted. Why would I get hurt? I asked. Because this isn't real, she said. It's not secure. People don't just get published out of nowhere. And if you get your hopes up, I already did that once, I said softly. She stopped. What? I looked past her, my gaze settling on the typewriter. I got my hopes up a long time ago, I continued, and I let them go because I thought it was the responsible thing to do. Emily didn't respond. And maybe it was, I added. Maybe it was the right choice at the time. But that doesn't mean it has to be the only choice I ever make. She stared at me, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. You're serious about this? She said. Yes, and nothing I say is going to change your mind. I hesitated. Not this time, I said. The words felt heavier than I expected. Emily let out a slow breath, her shoulders dropping slightly. For a moment, I thought she might argue again, but instead, she just shook her head. I don't understand you, she said quietly. I know, I replied. She turned toward the door, pausing only for a second before opening it. Just be careful, she said, without looking back. Then, she was gone. I stood there for a long time after she left, the silence settling around me again. But this time, it didn't feel quite as empty. I walked back to the typewriter and sat down. My fingers hovered over the keys, and then, without hesitation, I kept writing. I didn't send the pages that day, or the next. They sat on the corner of my desk, neatly stacked, as if waiting for a decision I wasn't ready to make. Every time I walked past them, I felt a strange pull, half hope, half fear. It had been decades since I had allowed myself to imagine anyone reading my words. Not just reading them, but judging them, accepting them, rejecting them. That kind of vulnerability doesn't come back easily. Still, I kept writing. Every morning after my coffee, I would sit down at the typewriter and let the past unfold in front of me. Not the polished version of it, not the one I used to tell Emily when she was young. The real version, the harder one. I wrote about the year everything almost fell apart. Emily was 10 at the time. Old enough to notice things, but not old enough to understand them. She had started asking questions why we couldn't go on vacation like her friends, why I seemed so tired all the time, why Richard came home later and later each night. I had answers for her back then. Carefully chosen ones. We're just saving money, I would say. Your father is working hard for us. Everything is fine. But none of that was true. The truth was, we were drowning. Richard had made a decision, a risky one. He had invested a large portion of our savings into a business opportunity that promised stability, growth, a better future. It collapsed within months. I still remember the night he told me. He sat at the kitchen table long after Emily had gone to bed, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He didn't look at me when he spoke. I lost it, he said quietly. At first, I didn't understand. Lost what? I asked. He swallowed, his jaw tightening. Most of it. The words hit like a physical force. How much is most? I pressed. He finally looked up then, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Enough, he said. Enough that we're going to have to make some changes. That was the beginning. The slow unraveling of everything we thought was secure. We cut back on everything. Sold what we could. Took on extra work wherever it was available. I started working part-time at a local office, then full-time, when it became clear we couldn't keep up otherwise. And still, it wasn't enough. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how we were going to make it through the next month. Wondering what we would tell Emily if things got worse. But Richard, he never let her see any of it. He made sure of that. Every morning, he left the house with a smile even when I knew he hadn't slept. Every evening, he came home and asked Emily about her day like nothing was wrong. He carried the weight of it quietly. Too quietly. I paused, my fingers resting on the keys. The memory felt sharp, even now. There was so much I hadn't written about him before. Not because I didn't remember, but because I hadn't been ready to face it. I started typing again. I wrote about the arguments, the ones that happened late at night in hushed voices when we thought Emily couldn't hear. The frustration, the fear, the blame that crept in even when we tried to keep it out. You should have told me, I had said once, my voice breaking. I thought I could fix it, he replied. You thought wrong. The words had hung in the air between us, heavier than anything that had come before. I had regretted them the moment they left my mouth, because I knew he wasn't the only one who had made a mistake. I had trusted him blindly. I had believed things would always work out. We both had. But life doesn't reward blind faith. Not always. I stopped typing and leaned back in my chair, my chest tight. For years, I had told myself that those memories were behind me, that they didn't matter anymore. But writing them down made them real again, and somehow that felt necessary. A soft knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. This time, I knew who it was before I even stood up. Noah. When I opened the door, he smiled, holding a small notebook in his hand. Good timing, he asked. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. I was just writing, I said. I figured he replied, glancing toward the living room. I can hear that typewriter from my porch, you know. I smiled faintly. I hope it's not too annoying. Not at all, he said. It's actually kind of comforting. He stepped inside his gaze, immediately finding the stack of pages on the table. Have you thought about what we talked about? He asked. I hesitated. A little, I admitted, and I crossed my arms more out of habit than anything else. I don't know if I'm ready, I said. These aren't just stories. They're everything. Noah nodded as if he expected that answer. That's exactly why they matter, he said. I shook my head. You don't understand. If I send this out, I'm not just sharing my life. I'm sharing Richard's, Emily's, things they might not want anyone else to know. Noah was quiet for a moment. That's a fair concern, he said. But let me ask you this. Are you writing to protect them, or to protect yourself? The question caught me off guard. I stopped, because I didn't have a clear answer. I don't want to hurt anyone, I said finally. And do you think telling the truth is the same as hurting someone? He asked. I looked at him uncertain. Sometimes it feels that way. Noah nodded slowly. It can, he said, but sometimes the truth is the only thing that actually heals. His words lingered in the air. I thought about Emily. About the way she looked at me yesterday, frustrated, distant, certain she understood everything about our past. She didn't. She couldn't. Because I had never told her. Not really. What if she hates me for it? I asked quietly. Noah met my gaze. What if she finally understands you? The possibility hit harder than I expected. I looked down at my hands again. For so long, I had believed silence was the safer choice. That protecting people from the truth was the same as protecting them. But what if I had been wrong? What if all I had done was leave them with half a story? I walked back to the table and picked up the top few pages. They're not finished, I said. They don't have to be, Noah replied. Not yet. I held the pages tightly, my heart pounding. Just a few pages, I repeated softly. Noah smiled. Just a few. I took a breath, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I sent the pages the next day. Even now, I can still remember the exact moment my finger hovered over the send button on Noah's laptop. It felt absurdly small for something that carried so much weight. This is it, I asked quietly. Noah nodded beside me. That's it. I stared at the screen. An email, a few attached pages, a name I didn't recognize. Olivia Harper, Senior Editor. It didn't look like the kind of moment that could change anything, but it did. Clara, Noah said gently, "You can still change your mind." I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "If I don't do this now, I never will." And with that, I clicked. The sound was barely audible, but it echoed through me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Noah closed the laptop softly, as if sealing the moment. "Well," he said, offering a small smile. "Now we wait." I nodded, though my chest felt tight. Waiting. I had spent most of my life waiting for the right time, the right moment, the right version of myself, and somehow it had always been just out of reach. Now there was nothing left to do but see what happened. The first day passed slowly. Too slowly. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped. Every time it didn't, I told myself I had been foolish to expect anything so quickly. By the second day, I had convinced myself it wasn't going to happen. By the third, I stopped checking. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. So I did what I always did when things felt uncertain. I wrote. The typewriter became my anchor again. The steady rhythm of the keys gave me something to hold on to, something that didn't depend on anyone else's opinion. That morning, I found myself writing about one of the hardest truths I had never told Emily. The hospital. I had avoided it for years, even in my own thoughts. But now the memory pushed forward, demanding to be written. Richard had collapsed at work. It happened suddenly. No warning, no preparation. One moment, he was at his desk. The next, he was on the floor, surrounded by coworkers who didn't know what to do. By the time I got the call, he was already in the emergency room. I remember the drive to the hospital like a blurred light sharp, turns my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. I don't think I even realized I was crying until I saw the streaks on my sleeves. When I walked into that room, everything changed. Machines, beeping sounds, the sterile smell of something too clean to be comforting. And Richard. He looked smaller somehow lying there in that bed, fragile. A doctor pulled me aside and spoke in careful, measured words. Stress, exhaustion, the strain of trying to carry too much for too long. I nodded as if I understood, but all I could think was I should have seen it. I should have known. That night, I sat beside him, holding his hand, watching the rise and fall of his chest, like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. When he finally woke up, the first thing he said wasn't about himself. It was about us. "Did I scare you?" he asked, his voice weak but steady. I laughed through tears. "You nearly killed me," I said. He smiled faintly. "Good," he murmured. "At least I know you still care." Even then, he was trying to make me feel better. I swallowed hard and kept typing. Because that wasn't the part I had avoided. The part I had avoided came later. After the doctor left. After the machines quieted. After the room settled into that strange, suspended stillness. Richard looked at me differently that night. Not like a husband trying to reassure his wife, but like a man who had something he needed to say. "Clara," he said softly, "if anything ever happens to me, don't I cut in immediately. We're not doing this. Listen to me." He insisted, his grip tightening around my hand. I froze, because there was something in his voice I couldn't ignore. "I need you to promise me something," he said. I shook my head, already feeling the weight of it before he even spoke. "You have to go back to your writing." The words stunned me. "What?" I whispered. "You heard me," he said. "You gave it up for us, for me, for Emily, and I let you." "That's not, it is," he interrupted gently. "And I'm not saying it was wrong, but it wasn't supposed to be forever." Tears blurred my vision. "Richard." "You have something, Clara," he said. "Something real. And I don't want you to spend the rest of your life pretending it doesn't matter." I couldn't answer, because I didn't know how, so I just nodded. And that was the promise I made. The promise I never kept. I stopped typing, my breath unsteady. The room felt heavier now, because writing it down didn't just bring the memory back, it brought the guilt with it. For years, I had told myself there was always a reason to wait, but the truth was, I had been afraid of failing, afraid of being seen, afraid of proving Emily right. A sudden knock at the door broke through my thoughts. I blinked, disoriented for a moment before pushing myself up from the chair. When I opened the door, Noah stood there again, but this time, something was different. He looked alert, excited. "Did you check your email?" he asked immediately. My stomach dropped. "No," I said slowly. "Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped inside, already pulling his phone out of his pocket. "You might want to sit down," he said. My heart began to pound. I followed him into the living room, my legs feeling strangely unsteady. "Noah, what is it?" I asked. He turned the phone toward me. "It's from Olivia," he said. For a moment, I couldn't move. The words on the screen felt distant, unreal. But then I leaned closer, and I read. The first line alone was enough to make my breath catch. "I couldn't put your pages down." My hands trembled. I kept reading, each sentence pulling me deeper into something I hadn't dared to hope for. By the time I reached the end, my vision was blurred again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. "She wants more," Noah said softly. I looked up at him, my voice barely a whisper. "More." He nodded. "She wants the full manuscript." The room seemed to shift around me. For years, my words had existed in silence, ignored, hidden, dismissed. And now someone was asking for more, not out of politeness, not out of obligation, but because they believed it was worth reading. I sank into the chair slowly, my heart racing in a way I hadn't felt in decades. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted. Noah smiled gently. "You already are." I looked at the typewriter, at the pages waiting beside it, at the life I had been writing piece by piece. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something I needed to hide anymore. The house didn't feel the same after that email. It wasn't louder. It wasn't brighter. Nothing visible had changed. And yet, everything felt different, as if something invisible had shifted inside the walls inside me. Someone was waiting for my story, not out of obligation, not out of kindness, but because they wanted it. That realization alone was enough to make my hands tremble every time I sat down at the typewriter. "They want the full manuscript," I whispered to myself again, as if repeating it might make it more real. The full manuscript. Not just a few pages, not just a glimpse. Everything. I stared at the stack of papers beside me. It was thick now, months of memories, truths, and confessions I had slowly gathered together. But it still wasn't complete. There were pieces missing, important ones, and I knew exactly which ones. The ones I had been avoiding. I placed my fingers on the keys, but for once, nothing came. Because this part wasn't just difficult. It was dangerous, not to me, but to the image Emily had built her life on. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes. "You have to tell the truth," I murmured. Noah's voice echoed in my mind. But what if the truth broke something that couldn't be fixed? What if it didn't heal anything at all? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Before I could even stand, the door opened. Emily. She didn't wait this time. She stepped inside with purpose, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. There was no hesitation in her movements, no uncertainty, just tension. "We need to talk," she said. I stood up slowly. "All right." Her eyes moved immediately to the typewriter. "You're still writing?" she said, her tone flat, but tighter than before. "Yes." She crossed her arms. I thought I made myself clear. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not quite defiance, but something steadier. "You did," I said calmly. "I just chose not to agree." That stopped her. For a moment, she simply stared at me. "You're serious," she said. "Yes." Her jaw tightened. "Mom, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to protect you," from what I asked gently. "From disappointment," she snapped. "From people who will take advantage of you. From wasting your time on something that isn't real." "It is real," I said. "No, it's not." She raised her voice. "It's a fantasy. You think someone is just going to read your life story and suddenly decide it matters?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over to the table and picked up the printed email. "What's that?" she asked. I held it out to her. She hesitated, then took it. At first, her expression didn't change. Her eyes scanned the page quickly, almost dismissively. Then she slowed down. Then she read it again. I watched the shift happen in real time. Confusion, then disbelief, then something sharper. "This is," she began, her voice faltering. "This isn't real." "It is," I said quietly. She looked up at me, searching my face. "You sent your writing to a publisher?" she asked. "Yes." "When?" "A few days ago. And they responded like this," she said, holding up the paper. "They want everything." I nodded. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one carried something new, something uncertain. "You didn't tell me," she said. "I tried to," I replied. "But you didn't want to hear it." Her expression hardened again. "Because I didn't think it was serious," she said. "I thought it was just something to keep you busy." "It is something I said. It always was." She looked down at the paper again, her grip tightening. "What exactly did you send them?" she asked. "Just a few chapters." "And what's in the rest?" she pressed. I hesitated. "Everything I said." Her eyes flicked up. "What does that mean?" "It means I wrote the truth I said." "About what?" "About our life," I replied. "About your father, about things you don't know." Her face changed instantly. What things she demanded. I could feel the tension rising, filling the space between us. "This is exactly why I didn't want to send it," I said quietly. "Mom," she said, her voice sharper now. "What did you write about Dad?" I took a slow breath. "The truth?" I repeated. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the paper. "You're going to publish our family's private life?" she asked. "I haven't decided anything yet," I said. "But if I do, it will be because it matters." To who she snapped. "To strangers. To people who don't even know us. To me," I said. The words landed harder than anything else. Emily stared at me, her eyes wide. "So that's it," she said. "You're choosing this over me." "No," I said firmly. "I'm choosing myself." The room went completely still. For years, I had avoided saying anything like that, because it felt selfish, because it felt wrong, but now it felt necessary. "You don't understand," Emily said, shaking her head. "You can't just expose everything like this. There are things people don't need to know. Like what I asked, like whatever you think Dad did," she said. "He worked hard. He took care of us. That's all anyone needs to know." I felt my chest tighten. "That's not the whole story," I said. Her expression darkened. "What are you talking about?" I looked at her carefully, at the certainty in her eyes, at the version of the past she had built her life on. And I realized something. She didn't just believe it. She needed to believe it. "Emily," I said softly, "there are things your father went through that you never saw." "Then maybe they weren't meant to be seen," she shot back. "Or maybe they were just too hard to explain to a child," I replied. She shook her head again, more forcefully this time. "No," she said. "This isn't right. You don't get to rewrite our past just because someone offered to print your book." "I'm not rewriting anything," I said. "I'm finally telling it the way it really happened." Her breathing grew uneven. "And what if I don't want that?" she asked. The question hung between us. For a moment, I felt that old instinct again, the urge to back down, to smooth things over, to protect her from anything uncomfortable. But this time, I didn't. "Then you don't have to read it," I said quietly. Her eyes filled with something I couldn't immediately name. Hurt, anger, fear. "All these years," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "you never said anything. And now, suddenly, you're going to tell everything to strangers instead of your own daughter?" I swallowed. "That's not what I want," I said. "But you never asked." "That's not fair," she said. "No," I agreed softly. "It isn't." The silence that followed was heavier than anything we had said. Emily looked down at the paper one last time, then placed it back on the table. I don't know who you are right now, she said. I felt the weight of those words. Maybe I'm finally becoming someone you never took the time to know, I replied. She flinched. Then without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. This time, she didn't say, "Be careful." She didn't say anything at all. The door closed behind her with a quiet, final sound. I stood there for a long time, my heart still racing. Then slowly, I turned back to the typewriter. The page waiting inside it felt heavier now. Because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a line I had crossed. And there was no going back. I placed my fingers on the keys and began writing the part I had feared the most. I didn't expect Emily to come back. Not that soon. Not after the way she had left silent shaken, carrying something heavier than anger. That kind of silence usually stretches into days, sometimes weeks. But the next evening, just as the sky outside turned a deep shade of blue, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't sharp or urgent. It was hesitant. I knew it was her before I even opened it. Emily stood there, her posture different from the day before. Not defensive, not confrontational, uncertain. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, her eyes drifting across the room until they landed again on the typewriter. But this time, she didn't comment on it. Instead, she looked at the stack of pages beside it. "Is that everything?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. She nodded, as if she expected that. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a breath. "I read the email again," she said. I stayed silent. "And I looked up the publisher," she added. "They're real. They're actually reputable." There was something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Not doubt, not dismissal, recognition. "Yes," I said simply. She turned to face me. "I don't understand how this is happening," she admitted. You never told me any of this was possible." I held her gaze. "I didn't think it was," I said. The honesty seemed to catch her off guard. "But now you do?" she asked. "I think I'm starting to," I replied. She let out a slow breath and walked further into the room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "This doesn't make sense," she said again, softer this time. "All these years you were just writing, and I had no idea I wasn't hiding it," I said. "You just didn't ask." She flinched slightly at that. "I thought it was just a hobby," she said. I know again, softer this time. "All these years you were just writing?" "And I had no idea I wasn't hiding it," I said. "You just didn't ask." She flinched slightly at that. "I thought it was just a hobby," she said. "I know," I replied, and now suddenly, it's not. She pressed. "It never was," I said quietly. The words settled between us. Emily looked down at the floor, her expression tightening, as if she were trying to process something that didn't fit into the version of reality she had always believed. "What did you write about me?" she asked suddenly. The question was direct, sharp, and unavoidable. I hesitated. "The truth," I said carefully. She looked up immediately. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I can give," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "Did you make me look like a bad daughter?" she asked. "No," I said. "I told the story of what we went through." "That's not the same thing," she snapped. "It is," I said gently, "because stories aren't about blame. They're about understanding." She shook her head. "That's easy for you to say," she said. "You're the one telling it, and you're the one who never heard it," I replied. The words hit harder than I intended. She went still. What does that mean? She asked slowly. I took a breath. It means there are parts of our life you don't know, I said. Not because I wanted to keep them from you, but because I thought I was protecting you. Her expression shifted again, this time something closer to confusion. Protecting me from what? The truth, I said. Silence fell between us. Then she let out a short, disbelieving laugh. So now you're saying everything I know about our family is incomplete? Yes. She stared at me. That's ridiculous. Is it? I asked softly. Her eyes flickered. You think Dad was hiding something, she said? I didn't answer immediately, because this was the moment, the line I had been circling around for days. He wasn't hiding something from you, I said carefully. He was protecting you from something. Emily's face tightened. What are you talking about? I walked slowly toward the table and picked up a few pages from the stack. These, I said, holding them out. This is part of it. She hesitated. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly, she reached out and took the pages from my hand. Her fingers trembled slightly as she looked down. You're serious, she whispered. Yes. She swallowed. And then she started reading. I watched her closely, every shift in her expression, every small reaction. At first it was subtle, a slight furrow in her brow, a pause between lines. Then it deepened. Her shoulders stiffened, her breathing changed, and then she stopped. Her eyes stayed fixed on the page, but she wasn't reading anymore. She was processing. This, she said slowly. This isn't right. It is, I said quietly. She shook her head more firmly this time. No, she insisted. Dad would have told me if something like this happened. He didn't want you to carry it, I replied. That's not his decision to make, she snapped. Her voice cracked slightly at the end. For the first time, I saw something beyond anger. Fear. He was trying to give you a normal childhood, I said. Even when nothing about our situation was normal. She looked back down at the page, her hands tightening around it. You're saying we were struggling? She asked. Yes. How much she pressed. More than you ever knew, I said. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She kept reading, and then she reached the part I knew would change everything. The debt, the risk, the collapse. Her entire body went still. No, she whispered. No, that can't be right. It is, I said. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. All those years we were fine, she said. We had a house. We had food. Because we made sure you did, I interrupted gently. Her breathing became uneven. You're telling me we almost lost everything? She asked. Yes. And you never told me, she said. You were a child, I replied. I had a right to know. You had a right to feel safe, I said. The words hung in the air. She stared at me, her expression breaking apart piece by piece. I thought she began, then stopped. What did you think? I asked softly. She shook her head, tears starting to form in her eyes. I thought you were just ordinary, she said. That you didn't do anything significant. The honesty cut deeper than anything she had said before. But I didn't look away. I know, I said. And now you're telling me all of this was happening, and I had no idea, she whispered. Yes. She looked down at the pages again, at the life she thought she understood, and for the first time, she saw something else, something she couldn't dismiss, something she couldn't laugh at, something real. "I need to read the rest," she said quietly. My heart tightened. "Are you sure?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I don't think I've ever known you," she admitted. The words settled heavily between us, and this time, neither of us tried to deny them. Emily didn't leave that night. That alone told me more than anything she could have said. She sat on the edge of the couch, the pages still in her hands, reading slowly now carefully, as if each word carried weight she hadn't expected. The room was quiet except for the faint rustle of paper and the occasional shift in her breathing. I stayed where I was, near the typewriter, watching her without interrupting. This wasn't a moment I could guide. It had to unfold on its own. At one point, she paused again, her eyes fixed on a single paragraph. Her fingers tightened around the page, leaving a faint crease along the edge. "What does this mean?" she asked without looking up. I stepped closer. She pointed to a line I had written earlier that morning. "He didn't just lose money. He lost control of everything he thought he could protect." I exhaled slowly. "It means your father didn't just make a mistake," I said. "He carried the consequences of it alone." Emily shook her head slightly. "No, that's not what I remember," she said. "He was always in control. He always knew what he was doing." I felt a quiet ache in my chest. "That's what he wanted you to see," I replied. She looked up at me, then her eyes searching. Why, she asked. Why would he hide something like that from me? "Because he loved you," I said simply. The answer didn't satisfy her. It rarely does when love and truth don't align neatly. "That doesn't make sense," she insisted. "If things were that bad, I should have known. I should have been able to help." "You were 10 years old, Emily," I said gently. She flinched at the reminder. "I wasn't that young," she argued weakly. "You were," I said. "And even if you weren't, it wasn't your burden to carry." Her lips pressed together, but she didn't respond. Instead, she looked back down at the pages and continued reading. Minutes passed, then more. I could see the shift happening again, only deeper this time. Her posture softened, her shoulders dropped. The certainty she had carried for so many years was starting to crack. And in its place, something more complicated was forming. At last, she reached the final page in the small stack I had given her. She didn't move for a moment. Then she lowered it slowly into her lap. "That's not how I remember it," she said again. But this time, her voice was quieter, more uncertain. "I know," I said. She looked up at me. "Then whose version is right?" she asked. I held her gaze. "Both of them," I said. "Yours is what you experienced. Mine is what I lived through." She frowned, slightly trying to understand. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "It will," I replied. Eventually, she leaned back against the couch, her eyes drifting toward the ceiling. "I always thought we were normal," she said. "Not perfect, but stable, predictable. We tried very hard to make it feel that way," I said. She let out a short, shaky breath. "Was it ever real?" she asked. The question hung in the air. It wasn't about money or struggles. It was about something deeper, something harder to answer. "Yes," I said finally. "It was real, just incomplete." She closed her eyes for a moment. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted. I nodded. "That's okay," I said. "You don't have to figure it out all at once." She opened her eyes again, and really looked at me this time, as if seeing me not just as her mother, but as a person. "When did you start writing all of this?" she asked. "Years ago," I said, "but I stopped. Then I started again recently." "Why now?" she pressed. I hesitated, because I realized I couldn't keep pretending my life didn't matter, I said. Her expression shifted slightly. "Did you ever want to tell me?" she asked. The question hurt more than I expected. "Yes," I said. "Many times. Then why didn't you?" I took a slow breath. "Because every time I tried, it felt like there was never a right moment," I said. Or the right way to say it. And after a while, I convinced myself silence was easier. She looked down again. "It was easier," she said. "For me?" "I know," I replied. "But it wasn't easier for you," she added quietly. I didn't answer, because she already knew. The room fell into silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was reflective, like something had shifted between us, not fully healed, but no longer broken in the same way. After a few minutes, Emily sat up straighter. "I want to read the rest," she said. I nodded slowly. "It's not finished," I reminded her. "I don't care," she replied. "I need to understand." Her words carried something new. Not resistance, not judgment, need. I walked over to the table and picked up a thicker stack of pages. "This is what I have so far," I said, handing them to her. She took them without hesitation. "How much is left?" she asked. I glanced at the typewriter. "The hardest parts," I said. She didn't ask what that meant. Maybe she already knew. Or maybe she wasn't ready to know. Either way, she didn't walk away this time. She stayed. She sat there in the same room where she had laughed just days before and began reading the story she had never been told. And as I watched her, something inside me shifted again. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about being published or proving anything to anyone. It was about this moment, this fragile, uncertain bridge between who we thought we were and who we actually were, and whether we were brave enough to cross it. I turned back to the typewriter slowly. The page inside it was still waiting, still unfinished. But now it didn't feel like something I had to face alone. I placed my fingers on the keys, and this time I didn't hesitate. Because the truth wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to both of us. And whether it healed us or broke us further, it was finally being told. Emily didn't take the pages home that night. She stayed. That was the first real shift. Not the questions, not the arguments, not even the tears that had quietly formed in her eyes while reading. It was the fact that she stayed. She moved from the couch to the dining table without asking, gathering the rest of the manuscript into her arms like it was something fragile, something that needed to be handled carefully. "I'll read here," she said. I nodded. "I'll make some tea," I replied softly. It felt strange, almost surreal, moving around the kitchen, while my daughter sat only a few feet away, reading the life I had never told her. For years, we had lived in the same space without truly seeing each other. And now it felt strange, almost surreal, moving around the kitchen, while my daughter sat only a few feet away, reading the life I had never told her. For years, we had lived in the same space without truly seeing each other. And now, everything was being laid bare. I brought her a cup without saying anything and set it beside her. She didn't look up, just murmured a quiet "thanks" before turning another page. The silence stretched on, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was necessary. I returned to the typewriter, but I didn't start writing. Not yet. because I knew what she was about to reach, and I wasn't sure either of us was ready for it. An hour passed. Maybe more. Time had a way of slipping when something this heavy settled into a room. Then finally, Emily stopped. Not gradually, not hesitantly. She froze. The page in her hands trembled slightly. "No," she whispered. I closed my eyes briefly. She had found it. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising. I stood up slowly. "Emily, no," she said sharply, looking up at me. "Don't say my name like that. Just answer me." I stepped closer, my heart already pounding. She held the page up, her fingers gripping the edges tightly. "This part," she said. "About the hospital, about Dad collapsing? Why didn't you tell me?" I swallowed. "I wanted to," I said. But you didn't," she cut in. "You let me go to school the next day like everything was normal. You let me laugh with my friends while you were sitting in a hospital room thinking he might die." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I was protecting you," I said softly. "From what?" she shot back. "Reality?" "Yes," I said. "That's not protection," she cried. "That's lying." The word hit harder than anything else. Lying. I took a breath. "It was survival," I said. "For all of us." She shook her head, tears spilling over now. "I don't understand how you could do that," she said. "How you could just pretend everything was fine, because I needed you to believe it was," I replied. Her expression twisted. "So my entire childhood was just an illusion?" she asked. "No," I said firmly. "It was real. Your happiness was real. Your safety was real. We just carried the fear for you." She looked down at the page again, her breathing uneven. "You wrote that he asked you to go back to writing?" she said slowly. "That he made you promise?" I felt my chest tighten. "Yes." "And you didn't," she added. "No." She looked up at me again, her eyes filled with something deeper now. Why, she asked. The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. "Because I was afraid," I said. She frowned slightly. "Of what?" "Of everything I admitted. Of failing. Of being judged. Of losing what little stability we had left." She stared at me as if trying to reconcile this version of me with the one she had always known. "You gave up something that important because you were scared?" she asked. "Yes." "And you're not scared now?" she pressed. I hesitated. "I am," I said. "But I'm more afraid of never trying again." The words hung in the air. Emily leaned back in her chair slowly, her hands dropping to her lap. "I don't know what to do with this," she said again. Her voice was softer this time, less defensive, more lost. I moved closer, sitting across from her. "You don't have to do anything with it right now," I said. "You just have to let it exist." She shook her head. "It changes everything," she said. "Yes," I agreed. "I thought I knew our story," she continued. "I thought I understood what you and Dad went through." "You understood part of it," I said gently. "Not the part that mattered," she whispered. I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "For you, it did matter," I said. "You had a childhood. You had moments of joy. That wasn't fake." "But it wasn't complete," she said. "No," I admitted. She closed her eyes for a moment, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I wish you had told me," she said. "I do too," I replied. The honesty between us felt raw, unfiltered, and necessary. After a long moment, she opened her eyes again and looked at the rest of the manuscript. "What else don't I know?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. "Enough to make this hard," I said. She nodded slowly. "Then I need to finish it," she said. Her voice carried a new kind of determination. Not anger, not resistance, but something closer to courage. I released her hand and leaned back slightly. "Take your time," I said. She picked up the next page and continued. I returned to the typewriter, finally placing my fingers on the keys again. But this time, something was different. I wasn't just writing for myself anymore. I wasn't just writing for a publisher. I was writing for her, for the woman sitting across from me, trying to understand the life she thought she had already lived. I began typing again. The next part came harder than anything before, because it wasn't just about struggle. It was about consequence. The decisions we made after the collapse, the sacrifices that followed, the things we lost, and the things we never spoke about again. I could feel Emily reading behind me. I could feel her catching up to the truth I had carried alone for so long. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. Because even if it hurt her, even if it changed everything, it was real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to bring us back to each other. Emily didn't stop reading. Not that night. Not even when the clock passed midnight and the quiet hum of the house settled into something deeper, heavier, like it was holding its breath with us. She moved slower now. Each page wasn't just read, it was absorbed, questioned, resisted, and then slowly accepted. I could see it in her posture. The way she no longer flipped pages quickly, but lingered on certain lines. The way her fingers traced over sentences as if trying to feel what I had felt when I wrote them. And I knew what was coming next. The part I had avoided longer than anything else. The part that changed not just how she saw me, but how she saw him. It happened just after 1 a.m. Emily suddenly placed the stack of pages down on the table harder than before, not in anger, but in disbelief and before. Not in anger, but in disbelief. "No," she said again. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried something deeper, something fractured. I looked up slowly. She was staring at a single page, her handy trembling slightly. "This isn't right, F." "No," she said again. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried something deeper, something fractured. I looked up slowly. She was staring at a single page, her hand trembling slightly. "This isn't right," she said. "This can't be right." I stood and walked toward her, already knowing. She had reached it. "Emily," I began. "No," she said, shaking her head, her eyes still fixed on the words. "You're saying, Dad, you're saying he almost lost the house I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was worse than that." "Yes," I said finally. Her head snapped up. "You told me we moved because it was a better opportunity," she said, her voice rising. "You said the neighborhood was safer, the schools were better." "They were," I said softly. "But that's not why we moved," she snapped. "No," I admitted. Her breathing became uneven. "You're telling me we didn't choose to leave?" she asked. I swallowed. We didn't have a choice. The silence that followed felt like it stretched across years. Emily's face slowly crumbled, not dramatically, not all at once, but piece by piece. Like something she had built carefully in her mind was being taken apart in front of her. "All those memories," she whispered. "That house, my room." "I know," I said. "You let me believe it was just a normal move," she continued. "Like everyone else does. I wanted it to feel normal for you," I said. "But it wasn't," she replied, her voice breaking. No, I said again. She looked down at the page, her tears falling freely now. You wrote that Dad was desperate, she said, that he was trying to fix everything before I noticed. Yes. That he sold things I never even knew we had, she added. Yes. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He was scared, wasn't he? The question pierced deeper than anything else. Yes, I said quietly. He was terrified. Emily closed her eyes tightly. I never saw that, she said. Not once. He made sure you didn't, I replied. Why, she asked again, almost helplessly. I stepped closer, my voice softer now. Because he wanted you to believe your world was safe, I said, even when his was falling apart. She shook her head slowly. That's not fair, she whispered. That's not how it's supposed to work. No, I agreed. It's not. Her hands tightened into fists. All this time, she said, her voice trembling. I thought he was just steady, strong, in control. He was strong, I said, just not in the way you thought. She let out a shaky breath. And you? She said, looking up at me. Where were you in all of this? I held her gaze. Right beside him, I said. Her expression shifted. But you were working too, she said. You were always tired. I remember that. Yes, and I thought, she hesitated. I thought you just didn't want to spend time with me. The words landed heavily. I felt my chest tighten. That was never true, I said immediately. But that's what it felt like, she said. I nodded slowly. I know. She looked away, her face crumpling further. You were both struggling, and she trailed off. You were a child, I said gently. I was oblivious, she corrected. No, I said firmly. You were protected. She didn't respond. Instead, she picked up the page again, her eyes scanning the lines more carefully this time. Then she froze. Again. What is this? I was oblivious, she corrected. No, I said firmly. You were protected. She didn't respond. Instead, she picked up the page again, her eyes scanning the lines more carefully this time. Then she froze. Again. What is this? She whispered. I didn't need to look. I already knew. The loan, she said. You wrote that he took another loan after losing everything that he was trying to fix it without telling you. I closed my eyes briefly. Yes. Her head lifted slowly. He lied to you, she asked. The word felt sharp, but it was accurate. Yes, I said. Emily stared at me, her expression shifting again, this time not just confused or hurt, but shaken. That's not the man I knew, she said. I took a deep breath. It's not the man you saw, I corrected gently. She stood up suddenly, pacing a few steps away. This doesn't make sense, she said. Why wouldn't you tell me this before? Why wait until now? I watched her carefully. Because I didn't fully understand it myself back then, I said. And by the time I did, it felt too late. Too late for what? She demanded. To change how you saw him, I replied. She stopped, her back to me. And now? She asked. Now, I said slowly, I think you deserve to see the whole truth. She turned around again, her eyes searching mine. Even if it changes everything, yes. She stared at me for a long moment, Then she looked back at the manuscript, at the life she had lived and the one she had never known. "I don't know how to feel about him anymore," she admitted. The honesty in her voice was raw, unfiltered, and painful. "You don't have to decide that tonight," I said softly. She nodded, though her expression remained tense. I thought I knew who he was," she said. "You knew part of him," I replied. "The part he wanted you to have." "And the rest?" she asked. "The rest was harder," I said. She picked up the pages again, her hands steadier now, but her eyes more cautious. "I'm going to finish this," she said quietly. I nodded. "I'll be right here." She sat back down and continued reading. I returned to the typewriter once more, but this time the words felt heavier, because now the truth wasn't just being revealed, it was being reckoned with, by both of us. I placed my fingers on the keys and began writing again about the aftermath, about what happened after the move, after the debts, after the promises. Because the story didn't end there. In many ways, that was where it truly began. Emily didn't finish the manuscript in one sitting. Not because she couldn't, but because for the first time in her life, she didn't rush to reach the end. She paused, she reread, she questioned, and sometimes she simply sat there staring at nothing, as if trying to place herself inside a story she had unknowingly lived. Morning came quietly. I hadn't slept much. Neither had she. The sun slipped through the curtains, casting a soft light across the table where the manuscript lay. No longer just my words, but something shared between us. Emily was still sitting there, one arm folded on the table, her head resting against it. The pages were spread out unevenly, some turned over, others marked by the crease of her grip. For a moment, I just stood there, watching her. Not as a child, not as someone I needed to protect, but as a woman who was finally beginning to understand. She stirred slightly, her eyes opening slowly. For a brief second, she looked disoriented. Then she saw the pages, and everything came back. "Oh," she murmured, sitting up straighter. "Morning," I said gently. She looked at me, her expression softer than it had been in days. "Did I fall asleep?" she asked. "Yes." She glanced at the manuscript again. "I didn't mean to stop," she said. "You didn't stop," I replied. "You paused." She gave a faint, tired smile. "That doesn't feel like enough," she said. "It is," I said quietly. "For something like this, it has to be." She nodded slowly. Then her eyes drifted back to a specific set of pages, the ones she hadn't finished. "The part after the move," she said. "That's where I left off." I felt a slight tension in my chest. "That's where things changed," I said. She looked up at me. "They hadn't already?" she asked. I hesitated. "They had," I admitted. But that's when the consequences became unavoidable. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached for the pages again. But before she picked them up, she paused. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." She looked at me carefully. "Did you ever resent me?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "No," I said immediately. "Not even when things were that bad," she pressed. "Especially not then," I replied. She frowned slightly. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," I said softly. because you were never the reason things were hard. You were the reason things were hard. You were the reason we kept going. Her eyes softened, but doubt still lingered. I feel like I should have done something, she said. You couldn't have, I said firmly. But I didn't even notice she insisted. I was just the reason we kept going. Her eyes softened, but doubt still lingered. I feel like I should have done something, she said. You couldn't have, I said firmly. But I didn't even notice. She insisted. I was just living my life. That's exactly what we wanted, I said. She looked down her fingers, brushing lightly over the pages. I thought I understood sacrifice, she said, but I didn't. I sat across from her. Most people don't, I said, not until they see it up close. She nodded slowly. Then without another word, she picked up the manuscript again and kept reading. I didn't interrupt her this time. I let her move through it at her own pace, because the next part wasn't just about the past. It was about something even harder, regret. The consequences of the decisions we made after everything fell apart. The quiet distance that grew between Richard and me. The things we stopped saying. The things we assumed the other already knew. And the things we never had the courage to admit. I could see it on Emily's face as she read. This part was different. It wasn't about external struggles anymore. It was about us, our relationship, our silence, and the cost of both. At one point, she stopped again. Not abruptly, but slowly, like she had reached something she didn't want to accept. You stopped talking to him, she said quietly. I looked at her. We didn't stop talking, I corrected. We stopped saying what mattered. She swallowed. You wrote that you were both in the same house, but it felt like two separate lives. Yes. Her voice dropped lower. I remember that, she said. I felt something tighten inside me. You do? She nodded. I thought it was just normal, she said. Parents being busy, tired, not really paying attention. I shook my head gently. No, I said. It wasn't normal. It was what happens when people are too afraid to face what's opal or too afraid to face what's broken. She looked down again. And I didn't notice, she said. You noticed something, I said. You just didn't understand it. She let out a slow breath. I thought you didn't love each other anymore, she admitted. The words hung in the air. We did, I said softly. We just didn't know how to show it anymore. Emily's eyes filled again. That's worse, she whispered. I didn't disagree, because she was right. Silence can be louder than anger. Distance can hurt more than conflict. She picked up the next page, her hands steadier now, but her expression more guarded. What happened after that? She asked. I hesitated. Keep reading, I said. She nodded and continued. The room felt smaller now, not physically, but emotionally, like everything we had avoided for years was finally filling the space between us. I sat back, watching her move through the rest of the section. The arguments we never had, the apologies we never said. The moments that could have changed everything, but didn't. And then, she reached the part I had struggled the most to write, the final months, the quiet deterioration, the realization that some things don't break all at once. They fade, slowly, until there's almost nothing left. Emily stopped again, her hand covering her mouth. You didn't know, she whispered. No, I said. Her eyes filled with shock. You really didn't know he was that sick. I shook my head. Not until it was too late. She stared at me. But you were right there, she said. How could you not see it? Because I was focused on everything else, I said. On surviving, on keeping things together. Her voice trembled. And he didn't tell you? No. Why, she asked again. I looked at her carefully. For the same reason he didn't tell you anything I said. He thought he was protecting us. She closed her eyes, tears falling freely now. That's not protection, she whispered. I know. The silence that followed was overwhelming, but this time, we didn't run from it. We sat in it, together. And for the first time, we understood the cost of everything we had never said. Emily didn't cry loudly. There were no dramatic sobs, no raised voice, no desperate outbursts. Instead, the tears came quietly, steadily, the kind that don't ask for attention but carry far more weight. She sat there, the final pages of that section resting loosely in her hands, her gaze unfocused, as if she were no longer reading the words but living inside them. I don't remember it ending like that, she whispered. I stayed still, giving her space. It didn't, I said softly. Not for you. She shook her head slowly. But for you, it did. Yes. The room felt smaller again. Not suffocating, but intimate. Like everything that had been hidden for years had nowhere left to go. Emily wiped her face with the back of her hand, then looked down again. You wrote that the last few months felt like waiting, she said. Yes, for what she asked. I hesitated. For something we couldn't stop, I replied. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. Because she understood, even if she didn't want to. You knew he was getting worse, she said quietly. I suspected, I said, but I didn't want to believe it. Her eyes flicked up. Why not? Because believing it would have meant accepting it, I said, and I wasn't ready to lose him. Emily's face softened. I wasn't ready, either, she whispered. I nodded. I know. She looked back down at the pages again. You wrote that he started forgetting things, she said. Small things at first. Yes, and you thought it was just stress. I hoped it was. She swallowed. And when you realized it wasn't, I closed my eyes briefly. It was already too late. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything before. Because this wasn't just about misunderstanding anymore. It was about loss. The kind that doesn't happen all at once. The kind that slips in quietly until there's nothing left to hold on to. Emily's voice broke again. I thought he just changed, she said. Got quieter, distant. He was, I said, but not in the way you thought. She nodded slowly. I thought he didn't care anymore, she admitted. The words hung between us, sharp, painful. I'm sorry, I said gently. She shook her head immediately. No, she said. Don't say that. You're not the one who should be apologizing. I didn't respond, because apologies weren't enough for something like this. Not anymore. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. Why didn't he tell me, she asked again. The question was softer now, less demanding, more vulnerable. Because he didn't want you to see him that way, I said. He wanted you to remember him as strong, as steady, as someone you could always rely on. Her eyes filled again. But that wasn't real, she whispered. It was part of him, I said. Just not all of him. She looked at me for a long moment. And you carried the rest alone, she asked. I nodded. Yes. Her expression shifted, from sadness to something deeper, something heavier. That's not fair, she said. No, I agreed. It wasn't. She placed the pages down slowly. I wish I had known, she said. I don't know. I would have been there. I would have paid attention. You were there, I said gently. Just not in the way you think. She frowned. What does that mean? It means he saw you, I said. Even when he was fading, he saw you. And that mattered more than anything else. Her lips trembled slightly. You really believe that? She asked. I know it, I said. The certainty in my voice seemed to reach her, because for the first time she didn't argue. She just nodded, slowly. Then she looked at the remaining pages. How much is left? She asked. Not much, I said. But it's the hardest part. She let out a quiet breath. Of course it is, she said. I watched her carefully. You don't have to finish it today, I added. She shook her head. No, she said. I think I do. Her voice carried something new again. Not just determination, but readiness. She picked up the next page and began reading. I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was, watching her step into the final part of the story, the part I had rewritten more times than I could count. Because it wasn't just about what happened. It was about what I hadn't done, what I hadn't said, the moments I had missed, the things I had assumed there would be time for. But there wasn't. There never is. Emily's breathing grew uneven again as she read. But she didn't stop. Not this time. She moved through it slowly, carefully, as if she understood that this wasn't just an ending. It was a reckoning. Then finally, she reached the last page. Her hands went still. The room fell completely silent. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just waited. Because this moment belonged to her. After a long time, she lowered the page into her lap. He died thinking everything was okay, she said quietly. I swallowed. Yes. Her eyes filled again. That's not right, she whispered. No, I said, but it's what he wanted. She shook her head, tears falling again. He should have known the truth, she said. He should have known that we understood, that we would have stayed. I felt my chest tighten. I wish we had told him that, I said. The words came out softer than I expected, because they weren't just part of the story. They were real. Emily looked at me, her expression breaking again. Why didn't we? She asked. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was simple and painful. Because we thought there would be more time, I said. The silence that followed was different. Not heavy, not tense, but final. Like something had settled into place. Emily wiped her face slowly, then looked back at the manuscript, at the life she had just discovered, at the truth she could no longer ignore. This isn't just your story, she said. I held her gaze. I know. It's his too, she added. Yes. And mine, she said. The words landed softly, but they changed everything. Yes, I said again. She nodded slowly. Then she looked at the typewriter, at the blank page still waiting inside it. You're not finished, she said. No, I admitted. She stood up, walked over to it, and placed her hand gently on the machine. You need to finish this, she said. I looked at her. I will. She nodded. Then after a moment, she added, and this time, don't leave anything out. I felt something shift inside me, something steady, something certain. "I won't," I said, and for the first time I knew I meant it. The house felt different after that. Not quieter, not louder, just clearer. Like something that had been clouding everything for years had finally lifted, leaving behind a space that was unfamiliar but honest. Emily didn't say much for a while after finishing the manuscript. She stayed near the table, her fingers lightly resting on the final pages, as if she wasn't ready to let go of them yet. I didn't rush her. For once, neither of us felt the need to fill the silence, because this silence wasn't avoidance. It was understanding. After a while, she stood up slowly and walked toward the window. The morning light had grown stronger now, stretching across the room in long, quiet lines. "I don't know how to go back to who I was yesterday," she said. Her voice wasn't broken anymore, but it wasn't steady either. It was searching. "You don't have to," I said. She nodded faintly. "I don't think I can," she admitted. I stepped closer, stopping just a few feet behind her. "That's not a bad thing," I said gently. She turned slightly, looking at me over her shoulder. "It doesn't feel like a good thing either," she replied. I understood that. Change rarely feels good at the moment it happens. It feels uncertain, uncomfortable, sometimes even unfair, but necessary. "What are you thinking?" I asked. She hesitated, everything she said with a small, tired exhale. "About Dad, about you, about me." Her eyes dropped to the floor. "I keep replaying things," she continued. "Moments I thought I understood. Things I said. Things I didn't notice." "That's normal," I said. She shook her head. "No," she said, "it's regret." The word settled heavily between us. I didn't argue. Because regret is part of understanding. "I wish I had asked more questions," she said. "I wish I had given more answers," I replied. She looked at me again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then slowly, she stepped closer, not all the way, but closer than she had been in a long time. "I'm sorry," she said, quietly. The words were simple, but they carried years inside them. I felt my chest tighten. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted gently. "I laughed at you. I dismissed you. I treated your writing like it didn't matter." I shook my head. "You didn't know," I said. "I should have," she replied. "You couldn't have," I said again. She exhaled slowly. "Maybe not," she admitted, "but I still did it." Her honesty didn't feel like guilt. It felt like accountability, and that mattered. "I'm sorry too," I said. She frowned slightly. "For what?" "Maybe not," she admitted, "but I still did it." Her honesty didn't feel like guilt. It felt like accountability, and that mattered. "I'm sorry too," I said. She frowned slightly. "For what?" "For not trusting you with the truth sooner," I replied. "For deciding what you could and couldn't handle." Her expression softened. "I think you were just trying to protect me," she said. I admitted. But I also made choices out of fear, and that created distance between us. She nodded slowly. "It did?" she said. The acknowledgement wasn't harsh. It was real. And for the first time, it didn't hurt in the same way. Because now we both saw it. Clearly. Emily glanced back at the manuscript on the table. "What happens next?" she asked. I followed her gaze. "I finish it," I said. And then she pressed. I hesitated. "Then I send it to the publisher," I replied. She turned back to me fully now. And if they accept it? The question carried more weight than before. Not skepticism, but curiosity. Then it becomes a book, I said. Her eyes searched mine. Our story, she said. Yes, she swallowed, and people will read it. Yes. Her expression shifted again, a mix of emotions I couldn't fully name. That's a lot, she said. It is, I agreed. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked something I hadn't expected. Are you going to include everything she asked? I looked at her carefully. I think I have to, I said. Even the parts about me, she asked. Yes. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. That was it. No argument, no resistance, just acceptance. And that somehow meant more than anything else. I want to read the final version, she added. You will? I said. She gave a small nod. Then after a pause, she asked, Can I help? The question caught me off guard. Help, I repeated. With the manuscript, she said. Editing, reading, maybe understanding it from my side too. I studied her for a moment. This wasn't the same Emily who had walked into my house days ago. This was someone new, someone who had seen the truth and chosen not to run from it. I would like that, I said. A small smile appeared on her face. Not wide, not dramatic, but real. Good, she said. We stood there for a moment, neither of us moving. Then she walked back to the table and gently straightened the pages. I think you should keep writing, she said. I will, and this time she added, glancing at the typewriter, don't stop halfway. I let out a soft breath. I won't. She nodded once more. Then she picked up her bag. I need some time, she said, to think, to process all of this. Of course, I replied. She walked toward the door, then paused. For a brief second, it felt like she might say something more. But instead, she turned back and stepped forward again, and hugged me. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. And it had been missing for far too long. When she pulled away, her eyes were still soft but steadier now. I'll call you, she said. I'll be here, I replied. She gave one last look at the typewriter. Then she left. The door closed gently behind her. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in this house. I walked back to the table slowly. The manuscript sat there no longer just a collection of memories, but something alive, something that had already begun to change us. I turned toward the typewriter. The blank page was still waiting, but now it didn't feel intimidating. It felt necessary. I sat down, placed my fingers on the keys, and began to write the final part. Not just about loss, not just about regret, but about what comes after. Because for the first time, I believed there was something after. I finished the manuscript 3 days later. Not because it was easy, but because for the first time I didn't stop when it became difficult. Every word of the final chapter felt like a quiet release of everything I had held back, everything I had softened, everything I had been too afraid to say. I didn't try to make it perfect. I tried to make it honest, and somehow that mattered more. When I pulled the last page from the typewriter, the familiar sound echoed through the room, but this time, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something opening. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the full stack of pages in front of me. My story, our story. Not hidden, not edited to protect anyone's comfort, just real. A soft knock broke the silence. I didn't need to guess who it was. Emily. She stepped inside, her eyes immediately finding the manuscript. You finished it, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. She walked closer, her expression unreadable at first, then softer. Can I? She asked, gesturing toward the pages. I nodded. Of course. She didn't sit this time. She stayed standing, flipping through the final section, reading parts, pausing at others. I watched her carefully, not nervously, not anxiously, but openly, because whatever she felt, I was ready to face it. After a few minutes, she closed the manuscript gently and looked at me. It's different, she said. I smiled faintly. That's one way to describe it. She shook her head slightly. No, she said. I mean, it's not just about what happened. It's about how it felt. For you? For Dad? I nodded. That's what I wanted. Her eyes held mine. And now I understand, she said. The words landed quietly, but they carried more weight than anything else she had said. Not everything, she added. I don't think I ever fully can, but enough. I felt something settle inside me, something steady. That's all I hoped for, I said. She gave a small nod. Then after a pause, she asked, Are you going to send it? I looked at the manuscript again, at the pages that had taken a lifetime to write. Yes, I said. She didn't hesitate. Good. That single word surprised me. You mean that I asked? Yes, she said firmly. You should. I studied her for a moment. You're not worried about what people might think? I asked. She shrugged slightly. I was, she admitted, at first, and now. Now she hesitated, then smiled faintly. I think the truth matters more than that. I felt a quiet warmth in my chest, not pride, something deeper, connection. I'm glad you think so, I said. She looked down at the manuscript again. Do you think he would have liked it? She asked softly. I didn't need to ask who she meant. Yes, I said. I think he would have loved it. She nodded, her eyes glistening slightly. Me too. We stood there for a moment, both holding on to that thought. Then she stepped forward and placed the manuscript back on the table. You should send it today, she said. I let out a small breath. Today. Why wait? She asked. I smiled. That sounded familiar, because it was something I used to say, a long time ago. You're right, I said. I walked over to Noah's laptop, my heart beating steadily now, not with fear, but with something stronger. Certainty. I opened the email, attached the manuscript, and for a brief moment, I paused. Not because I doubted it, but because I understood what it meant. This wasn't just sending a file. It was letting go of everything I had kept hidden, everything I had carried alone, everything I had finally faced. I glanced at Emily. She gave a small nod, and that was enough. I clicked send. The reply came faster than I expected. 2 days. That's all it took. Noah was the one who brought it over, knocking on the door with that same quiet excitement I had come to recognize. You're going to want to read this, he said. Emily was already there. She had started coming by every day now, sometimes to read, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to sit in the same space. This time, she stood beside me as I opened the email. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. I began reading, and by the second paragraph, I stopped breathing. They want it, I whispered. Emily leaned closer. What does that mean? It means, I swallowed, they want to publish it. The room went still. Then Noah let out a quiet laugh. I told you, he said, but I barely heard him. Because Emily was looking at me, not with doubt, not with confusion, but with something I had been missing for years. Respect. You did it, she said. The words felt surreal. I think we did, I replied. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Weeks later, I held the first printed copy in my hands. It was heavier than I expected, not physically, but emotionally. The cover was simple. My name printed clearly beneath the title, Clara Fleming. For a moment, I just stared at it, because it didn't feel like something that belonged to me, not after all those years of silence. Mom, I looked up. Emily stood beside me, her expression soft. Can I see? She asked. I handed it to her carefully. She ran her fingers over the cover, then opened it slowly, flipping through the pages, reading small parts again. But this time, she wasn't discovering it. She was remembering it. Our story, she said quietly. Yes. She closed the book and looked at me. I'm proud of you, she said. The words hit deeper than anything else, because they weren't just about the book. They were about everything. Thank you, I said softly. She hesitated for a moment, then added, I'm glad you didn't stop writing. I smiled. So am I. That night, I sat by the typewriter again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The blank page in front of me didn't feel intimidating anymore. It felt full of possibility, because this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the part where I finally started telling it, and for the first time, I knew someone was listening. There comes a point in life when silence feels safer than truth. When we convince ourselves that protecting the people we love means hiding the parts of life that are messy, painful, or difficult to explain. But silence has a cost. It creates distance. It builds misunderstandings, and sometimes it leaves the people closest to us feeling like they never truly knew us at all. Clara's story reminds us that it is never too late to tell the truth. Not the perfect version of it, not the version that protects our image, but the real one. Because truth, even when it hurts, has the power to heal in ways silence never can. It allows us to be seen, not just as who others expect us to be, but as who we truly are. And sometimes, that is exactly what brings people back together. It also reminds us of something else. Dreams do not expire. They may be delayed. They may be buried under years of responsibility, fear, and sacrifice. But they are never truly gone. And when we finally choose to return to them, they have the power to change not just our lives, but the lives of the people around us. So if you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, like your story wasn't worth telling, let this be your reminder. It is, and it always was. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever discovered something about your family that changed the way you see them, or have you ever put aside a dream you wish you could return to? Share your story in the comments. I read every one, and if you believe it's never too late to start again, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means more than you know.